Why can't I? There we go.
Screw your road. We're going up the ball. Oh, no, just got
Alright, good afternoon, judges. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Tong. Helping me with my presentation today is Stephen Mason. He likes to go by Mason. So today my presentation is going to be about tough calls and tricky situations. So pretty much what this is the difficult calls we have to make when we go to a table to make a judge call. So let's pick this. All right. When answering a judge call, we have a few expectations for the judges, right? What can we expect us as judges to be when we take a judge call?
Fair.
Be fair.
Correct.
There.
To be there, yes. To be present, that's important. That's assumed, I guess.
Good at a Skype problem.
Anything else?
We want to be correct.
To be accurate with our ruling, yeah.
Clear.
Yeah. So
You want
that's pretty much summed up with being professional, right?
We need to rule in line with current policy.
So we need to be like a good professional knows what he's doing, right? So he's presents himself clearly. He's respectful to the players in terms of body language and personal space and presentation. These are all for the professionalism. So we also require to do it in a reasonable time. Yeah. So we either not be too wordy or not wordy enough. Yeah, we can't just go there and blather on, right? And they ask us a question and you go, no, and just walk off. That's too short, right?
But they keep asking me about spell sky, they get activated.
So give them a short but detailed explanation, and just do it in a reasonable time. Investigate. Does anyone know what that actually refers to when it comes to making a judge call?
It means gathering information so that you can make the best decision possible, and also to find out the source of the mistake.
Yeah, so pretty much investigation is just asking questions, right?
Yeah.
Right. Do you have anything else to add, Ryan?
Yeah, so every judge call that we approach, we're investigating. Every judge call. Whether that investigation entails one question or 100. So, yeah.
To give the best ruling we can give.
Yeah.
And lastly, I think we should, all right, stick around after players have resumed their game. Yes, so oftentimes where player disputes happen, we've given our ruling, we should stick around to make sure that there are no follow-up questions or misunderstandings between the players. And we also have a few things we should not do, which is the first one is, don't assume you know what the player is asking. As I get older, I realize my hearing's going, and some events can get pretty loud. So I've often made the mistake of assuming what the player's asking me, and I've given a ruling so bad it cost that player the game. And yeah, it's pretty bad. So trust me, don't assume to know what they're asking. Make sure they finish their question. Yes, Tyler?
Guilty.
Yeah, guilty too.
Just always get them to repeat their question. Always. When you approach a table, they'll ask you, and you're like, okay, what would you like to ask? Because the first time they ask, it's going to be convoluted. So always get them to ask the question again, because it also helps them rethink what they're actually wanting to ask.
Yeah. If need be, paraphrase that question back to them.
Yes.
So that you're both on the same page, and if it takes a bit too long, you can always give extra time. Second, don't offer extra information. This is something that a lot of people, as human beings, do accidentally give away. Like it's important to realize that as a judge, you could have information to the opponent's hand, which the player asking you the question doesn't have. So be careful about what your facial expressions might accidentally give away. Like, regardless of your question's not going to, what you're asking is not going to save you. You know, don't let that influence your ruling. All right, so don't offer extra.
I was going to say, just adding on to that, because even Tone can play into it sometimes. Like at a competitive REL event, I think it's different to judging like regular, but at a comp REL event, had someone ask, "Oh, can I use spell skies to target this?" And if you say you can do that, if you say in such a way like even unintentionally, you say, "Oh yes, that is something you can do,"
Yeah.
and they'll be like, "Why do you say it like that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's because I can do." Yeah, it's hard to be
Yeah.
discerning.
Try and just
But
answer
you
their
have to be like,
question.
yeah, you just have to be like, that is a legal play. You can do that. Sometimes you have to switch modes. And like me, I'm a very animated person. I like to have a bit of banter, and that is what I would probably say in a regular environment, and I'd educate afterwards. But in comp REL, you would
Yeah.
Okay.
stop yourself from offering extra information.
Especially the can question. I
Can,
always
yes.
try and switch my mind to
Yeah.
that is legal or
Yeah,
that is not legal.
Oh, you're
Pithing
asking-
needle is
you-
the number one.
Yeah,
You can name anything.
Yeah, you can paraphrase and say, "Oh,
You
so
can name
you're
any
asking."
legal magic
You can name
card.
any card legal in the format.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
No, you can name any magic card.
Legal in the
Legal
format.
in the
That's
format,
right.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
right, legal in the format.
Yeah,
So
so
it almost
the-
says can't yours.
Chris,
yes,
109.
Can't name abandoned.
Right, guys, just Chris has
The
a
other
question.
classic example before the recent
But
rules
it's so
change
difficult
was
to-
can I lightning bolt that planeswalker?
Yeah, yeah, before the changes, yeah,
Yeah,
like all
but
the
before that was the
Yeah.
other classic example. You give them the exact opposite of the answer that they actually
wanted. Yeah.
wanted.
Yeah.
I am very glad that changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, like even judges tend to do that because like in like top eight matches, sometimes there's a judge standing just behind one player, and you can see their hand and they top deck the card they need to win the game, and he goes, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So be mindful. You know, you don't accidentally give away too much information. Don't make a scene. Like so this comes up to my next slide, which is when things get tricky, or you know, don't make a scene, as in, you know, don't draw too much more attention to what's happening than there needs to be. All right, it'll come up. And I think lastly, if we make a mistake, apologize. All right, like for the first negative thing, when I made the mistake, I assumed this guy was asking me something, which cost him the game. I apologized profusely. Like, it was so bad that because he lost the game because of my fault, he left. He left the F&M, and like I couldn't apologize more as he was leaving. But next week I comped his draft, so he was appreciative of that, and you know, like it was a mistake which cost him the game, so I apologized and made up for it. Yeah, so these are examples of more or less typical calls as judges that we take, like, and how we act as judges. But what happens if atypical stuff happens? Like, I'm sure all of us have had difficult calls when we have been judging or as players witnessed. All right, so I know I have. I've experienced all these either as a judge or a player. So the first one is angry players. So angry players, this is when the players disagree about something in the game, and they actually start attacking one another, like calling the other one either stupid or lying or cheating, and start accusing each other. Yeah, anyone experienced something like this before? Andre, like share your account if you would like.
So basically, there was a bit of a rules dispute where I think it was Valakut and Valakut's Scapeshift against a land destruction piece, where a player has been given certain information, where saying that if you ghost quarter a mountain before Valakut escaped it resolved, it would disallow all the other triggers. However, the player was referred to tectonic edge where it would get another land. So they've been telling each other like false information, and it just went downhill from there.
So this was you as a player?
No, as a bystander.
Okay. Was there a judge present?
Yeah, me.
Okay. Did you? What event was this at?
It was just a FNM, Thursday night.
Did you fix it for them?
No, it was a bit after.
Okay. And anyone as a judge handled something like that? Brendan?
Yep. So I had a situation where it was a pretty complicated board state. One player was going to their attack step and was debating whether to attack with some creatures. And it was a sort of he said situation where one player said, this is definitely the attack he declared, and the person who was attacking said, no, I didn't declare that attack yet, I was still debating it. And so they just got into this really heated argument about where they would start calling each other names. These were two very good friends of mine, two very good friends of each other who just, had enough of each other, would just say each other's names. So, very difficult situation to fix because I don't know what happened, I don't know if he declared that attack or not. But I pretty much had to say, this was that, I said there was a couple of newer players, so I just said, look, let's calm down, separated them, spoke to them individually, see what happened. And then after a couple of minutes of them just getting to cool down, they agreed to just say, hey, let's just, and this was getting close to the so they said, okay, let's just call this a draw and we'll make up again later. But just the initial fighting and calling each other names was very stressful to respond to because it was my first experience trying to dealing with some sort of angry players.
Adrian?
Yeah,
So I have my example from literally last Thursday, which was the one before about the player playing no cards in his deck in English, and then the other player getting really upset that he couldn't read any of the cards. And it was a matter of, in the moment, I'm just like, hey, look, I understand it could be frustrating, but opponents are allowed to play in any language they want, as long as it's a legal Magic card. You can call me. I can help you out with the wording of cards. And for that case, because it was game 3 and 5 minutes left on the clock, when I got this interaction, I'm just like, I'll hang around for the rest of the match. And the player was like, okay, like now I know everything's above board. My opponent's not trying to cheat me out of something. I'm just frustrated that I'm losing to this deck. So the player seemed to take that on pretty well, and sort of played out the rest of the match there.
Cool.
And a big part of that is using sort of your authority as a judge to sort of diffuse that situation.
Sometimes just being a witness to irrational behaviour comes from that irrational behaviour.
Alright, so a few things when dealing with angry players. I think the most important thing is that you remain calm yourself. Like if you lose it, if they see the judge losing it, there's pretty much no hope for the players to reconcile. Also, we usually try to separate the players. Like whether say, hey, come with me, and move them so they're no longer within staring each other. If you can't do that because there's no space or there are too many players in the way, you get a lot of judges say to you, put yourself between them so that they have to look at you rather than each other. All right, so make a space between them. It's important to speak to the players separately because if they're within earshot of one player giving that explanation to you, they might interject, saying, no, that's not what happened. You said this, and the whole thing can just start again. Yeah, and don't assume that one of them is not telling the truth. Like they could both be telling the truth, and in their perspective, they just might have missed something. So don't assume that one of them is trying to mislead you. Of course, it's important to investigate. Yeah, but important. Don't assume and don't rush to give your ruling. You can always give extra time. In fact, you should give extra time when angry players do start arguing with one another. And if they can't be peacefully brought back to playing the game, you might need a different strategy. And oh, definitely stick around after that to make sure they don't like one of them doesn't jump across the table and choke the other guy out. So that's one example of angry players. And the next tricky situation is the immature player. Anyone had to deal with kids? Yeah, sometimes they can be very difficult.
4-year-old once.
All right, share your story, please, Lindsay.
Oh, I was playing at Group Games of Thalanga and lined up with a 4-year-old playing Magic. His father was playing in the tournament, and so was the 4-year-old, and couldn't read the cards. He just knew what they all were. And yeah, that was interesting. So it was a case of having to just literally baby them through the game. And when they were playing against other people, and you were doing the judge thing, just explaining very clearly to a very, very young person. So, and it's a little bit difficult as well, because when they're that young, the father's in the room, and you've got to be very careful about how you talk to this child. Not just because you have a responsibility as an adult with the child, but because the parent is there as well.
Anyone else with maybe a more difficult child? Jack? Was it you?
It was, but no, I once played against someone, I'm not entirely sure how old they were, probably a little bit over 10, and they just kind of, they did some stuff that obviously they shouldn't do, like they would just cut their deck sometimes, just absent-mindedly. I said, look, I know it may seem stupid, like you don't know what order the cards are in anyway, so it doesn't matter, but don't do that. And they just kind of kept doing weird things like that, and I don't think it was malicious or anything, but after a little while I was just like, look, you really have to stop, and they didn't really like being told that. So it was hard to deal with.
Adrian?
I once had a young player at a tournament who did something. I didn't know what the exact situation was, but I got called over when this child was bursting into tears. Kid was probably about 12, 13, but he believed that his opponent was accusing him of cheating. And he was adamant that he was not cheating, and he relayed to me this story about how he stopped playing chess because he'd been called a cheater there, and he was just inconsolable. And this is really, really tricky because this makes the opponent really uncomfortable. The opponent, I believe, was just saying something like, the small child was playing Burn, so I'm going to assume he was doing something like lava spiking a creature, and just telling him that he can't do that. Whereas the child had completely taken it the wrong way because he didn't have the emotional maturity to sort of be like, oh, that's right. In that kind of situation, you just need to, in that situation, I just separated the two players, and I just spoke to the younger player and I'm like, hey, look, that's really not what your opponent's getting at here. Do you want to walk me through what was happening? We'll make sure that this game's being played correctly. I know that you're not cheating, and we'll carry that on.
Yeah, sounds like that was
Yeah, it was
very difficult,
horrible.
tough call. in a tricky situation. So a few tips when dealing with immature players. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be children. It can be like people with maybe learning difficulties. You know, some you know, mentally challenged people.
Not even normal, perfectly rational people. Some people just really don't like losing.
Oh, yeah.
That is an immature attitude.
Another example would be the parents.
Okay, elaborate, please, Chris.
All right, so at the GP, a player received a tardiness penalty for being almost 15 minutes late into the round. And they were upset about it, as pretty similar to that. And then a few minutes later, they've come back up because their parent has been told about it. And then we've got to deal with the parent about the whole situation as well, about how they were 15 minutes late into the round, so they're not going to be able to play Magic this round.
Yeah.
And then that wasn't good enough for the parent, so you got to deal with the parent as well as the player.
We'll see where they get it from.
That is a really tricky conversation to have.
It is.
Because often the parents are like, well, I paid for them to play, so I'm not getting my money's worth, and also this is a kid's game. You know, how
Yeah.
can you expect a child to act like an adult? Yeah.
Is it a kids game though? It has a 13 plus rating on the cards.
It does indeed.
But that's Hasbro in general. I have a sort of tricky situation that's sort of starting to touch on an older player. There was a pre-release that I was judging as a level 0, and this father brought his child along to the event, and this kid had to be maybe 5. And this kid was actually quite impressively playing very well. Knew a lot of the cards, had a little bit of trouble reading, but most of the time his dad was there to help. They were playing Two-Headed Giant. They sat in front of their opponents, and their opponents proceeded to lose pretty badly. And one of these two players, the one who sat in front of the little kid, indignantly started going over the top. Started being like, why am I losing to this kid? Why has this scenario come up? He was just super lucky and everything and getting good sealed cards. And it got really out of hand rather quickly. Because they just didn't seem to have the capability to understand something happens, that's Magic, the variance that we live in. And so I had to pull them aside and be like, you know, you're making a scene. You're not really providing a good experience for them who've come to this pre-release. And most of these people playing pre-release are only here in pre-releases. They don't play comp event, and they don't understand the normal scenarios. So that was a bit of an interesting time to deal with it. Never had a problem with a kid, but I've had problems with people who can't deal with kids.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So, like, a few tips on how to deal with immature players, like younger players or immature adults. What's the first one? Remain calm. That's very important. Like, you don't let the crying child get to you. It's very important when talking to small people, like children, to get down to their body level, because like if you tower over them, you can come off as very intimidating. It's recommended to do it to players too. That a lot of people like either squat or kneel to answer calls, like leaning on the table and going like that can be quite intimidating to some players. So be mindful of your body language. Also remember that you are talking to a child or a minor. All right, like be very careful about laws when dealing with children. Yeah, like they can land you real hot soon. If possible, find a parent/carer. Like if the child is really young, like 5, and the parent isn't around, it's like, where the hell is the parent?
Just on that one as well, if the parent's playing in the event, let the opponent know that the parent is needed for something and that they'll get awarded extra time and actually remember to give them the extra time.
Yeah. Yeah. And if the parent doesn't want to come, you should make them come. If needed, remove the child from the table, from the play area entirely, like especially if they are like crying or throwing, like they start kicking or stuff like that. And if needed as well, inform the store staff, and ideally store staff do have some training on how to deal with younger players, and get the help if need be. All right. Third kind of person is dodgy players. Like I Googled for images, I typed in dishonest, and that was one of the first images that showed up. Yeah, so everyone has, like, we've all had someone who we suspect is doing something dodgy, but we just can't pinpoint it. Like he's always saying things which are, very incredible, or talk too fast, or offering you information you didn't ask for, yeah?
Or they're being ambiguous.
Or being super ambiguous, or
or unnecessarily cryptic, or doing things in a way that is like leading people, like doing things like an example that I can give of someone doing like unintentionally or just being misinformed is when your opponent's about to go to combat or something and they just like attack, and you were planning on doing something, or they you had like the old cryptic command beginning of combat problem. And I've had someone who's like, okay, I was like, oh, I want to go to combat. And it's like, no attacks. And he's like, oh, okay. Or it's like, we'll go to combat. It's like, okay, I'll cast cryptic command to tap everything and draw a card. And his opponent's like, oh, okay, I can't activate my land, can I? It's like, no, too late for that. Something like that. Something where it's not outwardly cheating, but they're doing something that is not honest either. Might just be misinformation, or a case of letting something slip by because it benefits you.
Timing. Yeah, like slightly off topic, there are some cultures where after you perform an action, they say yes or nod. The Japanese players, just because they say yes or nod doesn't actually mean they're passing priority or your spell is resolved. A lot of them do that to acknowledge that you have done this, but they might have something else.
It's more of a I've heard you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're dodgy.
It's worth paying really, really close attention to that one on passing priority and not passing priority. That's if anyone's seen me at anything that I am actually trying to win, I chew gum. It's so I don't say okay whenever my opponent does anything. But that, like, the ambiguity over what okay means is the biggest point where I have missed people who have been serial cheaters, is because it's not until I've established a pattern of, hey wait, this is the fourth time I've been asked about this month to the same person, where I'm just like, yeah, this isn't a mistake. This is an intentional way of creating some ambiguity around the game state, which can be exploited.
So, some tips on how to handle dodgy players. First one is remain calm, as always. Especially when that player has a bit of a reputation. Like, oh, so and so is and you see the judge call it's so and so's opponent, and you go, oh, not him again. And like, remain calm. Don't go in assuming that this guy is going to be lying or trying to pull a fast one. Like a few players, there was a player who just came off suspension, and like people always watch him like a hawk. It's important that we give them fair go. then it could honestly be just a simple mistake. You know? Yeah. So, if there is something dodgy going on, it's very important to separate the players and talk to them individually so that they can't collaborate on their stories. Does that make sense? Yeah? Again, don't jump to conclusions. Listen to them. I believe the next one is speak to spectators if possible. They might have noticed something which either player did not. Like a very common one is it's like turn 16 and like they can't remember whether they've played a land that turn, you know. And the player says he has, one player says he has not. You know, sometimes the spectators can pick that up and say that was the very first thing you did. Like, yeah, you did play a land. And if the off chance is you are DQing a player for lying and cheating, be very careful about using accusing them, accusatory terms. Like, I believe you are a liar. I believe you are a cheater. You know, even though you are DQing them for lying or cheating, it's very important not to call them liars or cheaters. Like, you say, unfortunately, I do not believe that this is what happened, can be used, or unfortunately, like, this has given you has created the potential for too great advantage for you, so I will have to disqualify you for that. So like you can DQ them, but still remain professional about it. Yeah, and let other judges know what has happened. We don't necessarily have to explain the specifics, but just let them know I had to disqualify someone the other day. Do you think I made the right call? Stuff like that. And like, you don't have to tell them who the players were. We normally don't do that for active investigation. Like, all DQs go through the investigation committee, and like we present them the facts and any evidence we've collected, and they will come to the conclusions themselves. Yeah. So yeah, but let other judges know, because it can usually play in your head. Oh, did I make the right call? And stuff like that. And lastly, we have the intimidating player. Anyone come across a very scary player before? This is quite rare. Lindsay's not
not as a judge, but as a player, DQ once where the guy just completely lost it and was just smashing the table in front of him. His opponent was freaked out.
Who was judging that?
I don't remember, but it was a spring hill.
Ooh. Okay. Did anyone call a judge?
Yes, there was a judge. I don't remember who it was.
I hope it was one, because it wasn't me. Yeah.
But it freaked out the guy who was there, and it freaked out everyone around him as well.
Does anyone know what infraction that is? Or
USC major.
it's at least major, right?
At least major aggressive behavior.
What makes it aggressive behavior?
Yeah, the actual like aggression.
The body language is enough to make it aggressive.
Yeah,
You
like-
don't actually have to make any aggressive action.
Yeah, they don't have to make any aggressive action towards anyone. They just have to do something that is aggressive, whether it be, you know, venting or whatever.
It's not an applied threat.
Yeah, it doesn't need to have a slight threat to it.
Ming has a good one of these.
I was also going to say, like, intimidating, like, at least the way I interpret it, doesn't necessarily need to be angry or, like, trying to be strong. Sometimes they can be so, like, cold. Like, I remember one of my first PPTQs. I played PPTQ before. It was I remember about years ago. I had an opponent, and it was in top 8 or something, and somehow managed to top 8. And my opponent pile shuffled my deck, and I was like, what? And my opponent was just like, didn't make eye contact, there was no friendly behavior, just like pile shuffled my deck, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. Like, I remember like feeling a bit like, what is he doing? Like, like I didn't call a judge. I felt like I was like too like a bit embarrassed and scared to like call a judge. Like I didn't know. I was like assuming what he's doing is normal. So and I felt like there was some sort of gap in like I wasn't confident, so I was like intimidated by that. And looking back, it's like silly, but now it's like some behavior that my opponent did, and I didn't know how to. I didn't feel comfortable stopping them from doing it. So I think it's fair to say it doesn't necessarily have to be them being angry or like physically intimidating. You can be like someone just saying things like, you know, or doing things that make you feel not confident or comfortable.
Anyone else? Like one example of intimidating player that I have encountered. I was judging a WMCQ at Spring Hill a few years back when we had WMCQs, and it was a top 8. And this player was sitting across, like they both had playmats, and his creatures, when they attacked, he moved them onto your playmat. You know, and like, and like, eventually, like his opponent had no space to play his own creatures. You know, like, yeah, like he asked, hey, can you move your cards back? And like, yeah, but then he kept doing it, and like, I said, yeah, keep your creatures on your own playmat, and then he took it well.
Actually, I've got an example of this. I think it's like really old tournament in one of the worlds or something like that. One of the players notoriously would stand on his chair to play. He'd stand on the chair and squat so that he was over his opponent.
He was actually a local player.
No, this was at a US event or something like that.
Okay, but we did have a local player who would do the same thing.
Yes. Like, if we're talking about
supremely uncomfortable.
Like he did it as a kid when he was really young, but it was a bad habit he had, and like, yeah, and this player was unfortunately like threatened at PTQ by his opponent because he I wouldn't say he deserved it, but he definitely like gave his opponents good cause to be very angry at him, because like when they were calculating combat damage and stuff, he would call out loud random numbers just to mess with their head. Yeah, and like when he's and he would keep his life score, life totals. He would write in binary with ones and zeros. Yeah, and on his notepad he would have random numbers as well, just to throw off his opponent. Yeah, and like his round 6 opponent before top 8 was against this guy who was mates with his prior 2 rounds opponents, and like one was saying, yeah, this is the kid I was telling you about, and you could smell alcohol in their breath because they were drinking from in between rounds, and yeah, and
that's not allowed, is it?
That's not.
If they do it offside and then come
Yeah,
back, it's like
if they do it offsite, it's fine. I mean, it's legal.
there's,
so long-
there's nothing we can do about it.
yeah, we
Unless they
can't
make
govern
tournaments.
outside of the
Yeah.
tournaments.
It's outside assistance.
They also recently.
It's not disallowed as of the last WPN update.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not disallowed.
Yeah.
As of the last WPN.
Stores are allowed to serve alcohol.
If the store itself is allowed to serve
Yeah.
alcohol.
Yeah, but then there's like I thought they weren't allowed to allow players to play in sanctioned events if they were under the effects of alcohol.
Well,
Yeah, but once
You're not allowed to make
You
that
cannot
determination.
play if you are drunk and disorderly, but you can. It's like just basic liquor license rules. You can't have someone being disorderly, but if they're drunk and they're pleasant and lovely, then there's not really any reason to kick them out.
all right. So, and this last round opponent, he threatened the kid. He said, "Just wait till you're outside," and the kid just visibly shook. Like he was 17, so he's not that young anymore. But like these 3 guys, they were from Townsville.
That's fine.
Best part about Townsville. He's from there.
Is the side say now leaving Townsville?
Yeah, so
right?
like I believe I was the first judge to be called to it, because I knew the kid, and like he was crying and everything, and his opponent quickly left the venue. Like we couldn't stop him in time, but he got DQ'd anyway for that. So that's an example of anyone as a judge had a player intimidate you? No?
I've had them get quite angry at what I'm saying, like start disagreeing quite vehemently. No, I saw it. I saw this elsewhere.
Yes. So that's one.
Sorry, I do have an example of something as well.
One of our more what's the term I'm thinking of? Prolific players in Queensland is a notorious name dropper. Like when your ruling isn't to his favor, he would start saying, "Oh, but this high-level judge said I could do this," or I said, or he'll say this famous Japanese pro player did this and it was allowed and stuff like that. Yeah, this it doesn't have to be physical to be intimidation, but just making you second guess yourself because he knows all these famous people is another form of intimidation. All right, so yes,
I have had an example of that. Sort of not really realizing exactly how it was, but looking back at it, it very much was that he was coming off aggressive. There was a situation where I was trying to explain to him a rules interaction. He's like, "But this is how it got played ages ago." I'm like, even if that's how it was, this is how it is now. He's like, "Oh, but I've seen recently there's something like this." I'm like, if that is how it is, but I'm explaining to you how it is. And I went over it a number of times trying to explain to this player. It got to the point where he's like, "Well, I need to hear it from an L2. I'm like, but so I understood a little bit of, okay, I guess you're not going to really look at an L0 even if he's been judging pre-release events and such. But then considerably like, all right, I'll get this L1 to contribute. He's like, "No, I don't want to listen to him. I want to listen to an L2 that I know." And it got very much to the point of, no one else's decision, no one else's choices are valid unless it's someone I actually respect. And that ends up quite intimidating for sure.
Yes, Chris.
That's something to point out that's really important as well. If you're taking a judge call, the judge level at the table does not matter.
Not in the slightest.
It should.
You are the judge, and that's all the player needs to know. If they want to appeal, that's fine. Then it's the head judge, and that's a slightly different thing. But if you're taking a ruling, you're the judge, and it doesn't matter what level judge you are.
Yeah. Some people also. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that was, depending on what the next slide said, that was actually what I was going to say. The easiest way to diffuse this is, I'm the judge. This is my ruling.
Exactly.
If you have heard it elsewhere, I'll follow that up for you, and I'll check back with you at the end of the round. Especially when they've said, "Oh, but I heard it from blah 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 level 2." Best thing about the modern age is you can message that level 2.
And all of us are very easy to contact at any time. I've
Be like,
taken
"Yo,
ruling
did you
from this
make
guy
this
at
rule?"
3 a.m. before.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I did, and here's the extra details. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, there's also some players who, as a judge, like I'm not like there's some people who don't find me too. Okay.
Wait.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to
Chris.
sexy it.
Yeah. A lot of players who kind of know you or like want to throw some banner at you to say, "No, I don't want you to judge this." It's important to know that you are a judge still, and no matter what that person says, you should still take that ruling and make sure that you give them that ruling and not be forced back from that.
Also, we can really have each other's back on that exact one. If they're like, "No, I want this ruling from another judge," and you're both there. Say it's just like a casual weekday event, or a regular weekday event. One judge gets up to answer the question, and they're just like, "I want that answer from a better judge." And you're like, "No, the judge has made the ruling," and just refuse to participate unless that judge made the wrong ruling.
Yeah.
At competitive rules enforcement level events, doing that is unsporting conduct. So, yeah, just if you are the only judge there, be assertive about that you are the head judge and that your ruling is final, and of course be diplomatic about it, like how Adrian said it. Like, I'll be more than happy to follow it up for you and get back to you afterwards, and we can discuss this further. But at the moment, this is my ruling, and it's fine. Please play on. Just be assertive, and yeah. Yes.
Is there a difference between like appealing that, like judge call, or just there obviously is, I don't want you to make a judge call, I want someone else. What are the steps to appealing that judge?
The judge who answers that call first
Yep.
is the player is required to let the judge give his ruling before asking for someone else. Like you can give the ruling and you can say, oh, if you are not happy with my ruling, you are welcome to appeal it to the head judge. All right? Yeah.
If you're the only judge, it makes it a bit easier.
Usually,
but-
if you're the only judge, usually pass it on to the TO.
No.
I've only had Mason as my TO, so.
Yep.
Pass it on to
If
TO.
TO is another judge.
If your TO is a judge, that makes it like.
So directly to your question, specifically saying you want a ruling from a different judge is basically trying to say that the judge answering your situation now isn't good enough, and that's unsporting conduct.
You're undermining a judge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Appealing a ruling is different because you always have the right to an appeal, because you don't have to agree with the judge's decision. Now, when the judge makes the decision, you can appeal it if you don't agree with it, or you don't like the way it was delivered, or anything like that. And that's for sometimes if you have more evidence to provide that the judge may not have taken into account as well. That's why if there's only the single judge and they issue a ruling, you can still appeal it, as long as you've got more evidence that they may not have taken into account. It's probably not going to get changed, but you've still got that opportunity to be heard, and maybe they just need to explain it to you better. But you can always appeal a ruling, and that's not a unsporting conduct thing at all. Unless it's like, I don't like that ruling, blah, 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 and you're actively being a dick about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on, most important thing is to remain calm. You might have to remove the player from other players or the player entirely, especially if he's getting loud. Of course, don't, like, if he is physically intimidating, don't
Pick him
just
up.
be by yourself with him. It's very important, especially for physical intimidation, to get other judges and store stuff to help out. If issuing him instruction, it's very important. Ming disagrees with this thing vehemently, but I stick to it. You need to use I statements when giving instruction, especially to some high conflict interactions. Like, I need you to calm down, not you need to calm down.
It puts you back in a position of authority.
Yeah.
Rather than saying you need to calm down, it's I need you to calm down.
There is actually an inherent problem. I'm a little bit either way. The inherent problem is if they're not accepting your authority, using I statements may not help with that. Like if they're intoxicated or something along those lines, and they're not accepting you, just by saying I don't care about you. Right? So I tend to lean towards your point of view on this, but yeah, I can see a case for a passive
The
voice.
opposite of that, though, is telling them that you need to calm down, is don't tell me what to do. So that's generally why I is better than you, because that way you're kind of forcing yourself into it as well.
Yep.
It's like, I am being active in this situation now, and it's not just all about you.
It takes the focus away from them attacking the other player and it puts it towards you. Sort of both players are then pointing at you and not each other.
Is it an option to put something like everybody needs to be calm so that we can rectify this? So there's no.
Let's all calm
finger
down.
pointing?
That's a good alternative.
There's all sorts of interesting de-escalation techniques.
Actually, in the one from my conflict resolution link from the blogs. If you read that, it's got a whole bunch of these kind of situations.
It's very important not to put yourself in harm's way, especially if the player is intoxicated. Don't try to physically restrain him. Like, that really is not the job description. Okay, like, but don't think you're a superhero. Yes, Chris?
With that, one trick you can use that doesn't make it obvious that you're separating them is sitting opposite the table. So you've got the table between them and you. Because if you've removed them from the play area, you've taken them over to, say, one of these tables over here. Put them on the other side of the table too. Don't sit down next to them or anything.
If it's
More
And-
accepting of getting hit.
If you are being physically intimidated as a judge, it's very important to let other judges know, because
We'll have your back. always.
yes, like we stick up for one another, and like it's a very serious problem which pretty much all judges and pretty much all stores need to know, especially if someone has been threatening others with like something or the other, like especially physical violence. How are we doing for time?
We're already. Well, you're actually okay. You've got 10 minutes left, but we are over time overall for the day.
Okay.
Sorry.
I will.
It's up to you.
I'll make mine a bit shorter.
It's cool. Like
I budgeted extra time in some
so,
speeches
like,
over others.
I was going to do some role playing, but in the favor of keeping things in time. Like we'll just cut Mason out entirely. He didn't make the final the final movie.
There's always editing.
Yeah, director's cut. Yeah.
This guy.
There's one story which I would like to share before finishing it with intimidating players. Like, this actually happened to me when I was in around 2012, 2013, which really shook me as a person, because like it was very scary at the time. Like I was called. I was the head judge. Matty was my floor judge. He was the owner of Good Games Margaret. And he had given his ruling, but it got appealed. And the person who appealed it, and like at the time he had a reputation of being a bit dodgy. And so I went over. It was he was on the play. It was and he had mulliganed once. And it was the end of his second turn, and he had played 2 lands. That's it. And his opponent had asked him how many cards in hand, and turns out he had 8. Very good player to have 8 cards after a mulligan. So Matty ruled it as drawing extra cards, and he would. Back then it was a game loss. And so I got called over and for the appeal, and the moment I got there, the player would not let me get in a word edgewise. Like, he just kept talking at me, saying, first he was trying to be, pleasant by saying, oh, the condensation from his can of drink got his cards damp and they stuck together, so he had too many cards. And then he would just say the same story over and over again, and he'll get louder and louder. And this guy is a physically big person. Like, he would be at least half a head taller than me. He was built like a brick shit house. And I felt very bullied. And like, when I tried to give my ruling, he kept interrupting me, because he must have thought that I was going to rule against him, And I felt very intimidated, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I said it was improper drawing at start of game, which is not the right infraction, but that was just a warning. And yeah, so and a few weeks afterwards, I felt very compromised as a judge. I was depressed, about it because I thought, like, I didn't suck as a judge. So yeah, so I actually wrote an email to James Mackay, who was then the regional coordinator for Australia. And yeah, he told me, I thought like he would say, yeah, you're level 0 or you're decertified or stuff like that. Because I was expecting that because I knew I stuffed up. It was I compromised the integrity of the event, But he said, yeah, it happens. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's important to communicate. Talk to other judges. We all have your back. Like, we understand shit like this happens, all right? And it's important to talk about it. All right, so yeah, that's my. It's very important that you know that you are not alone. So you let other judges know that this happened to you. So yeah. All right. So, any questions or comments?
Mason, you did an excellent job.
Thank you.